Hey everyone, it's Jeff here from Mormon Food Dojo. How are you guys doing? I thought I would show you my big boy here. This is Ash. He's a little over a year old, about 200 pounds. Say hi, buddy. Say hi. Who's this? Who's this guy right there? Good boy. Anyway, that's my big baby. He's afraid of my wife and my kids, but he loves me. So that's all that matters, right? Well, it's been a bit. Been a minute since about a week or so since I put up another video. I'm trying to still learn the, other YouTubers point and they say, click on this link for the last video or this here. Give me a little bit and I'll figure that out. I haven't quite figured that out yet. But if you're watching this, then you're on the right channel, so it'll be easy to find those videos anyway. And, I'm well, for those of you, if you're just tuning in for the first time, if this is your first video, that's fine. There's nothing. Everything I do is by the seat of my pants. I don't have anything planned. I don't have an outline. Today I do. I have a piece of paper here that I have for what I want to cover today, just so I try to stay on track because I do get off on tangents frequently. Mormon Fu is a spiritual martial art that I came up with when I was on my mission. And, for better or worse, over the last almost 40 years, since a little less, like 38 years since my mission, I think. Kind of gives you an idea of my age. I'll be 58 next year, I believe. And honestly, I'm getting back into my prime. I'll tell you that story. That's a whole nother, my journey, I guess. I believe that, if life didn't have journeys, it really wouldn't be worth the effort, would it? The experience along the way, the things you pick up, the things you learn. But here's a little something. Think about this. Every decision you've ever made, from the moment that you could make decisions. In fact, I'll even give you the benefit of the doubt. We'll start at 8 years old, when you had the age of accountability. Okay, for those of us who are members of the LDS Church. If you're not, and you were christened or baptized as an infant, then it's a little hard to under I think, because you can't reason at that age, obviously. But let's say everybody age of 8 kind of knows right from wrong, etc. So every decision you've ever made has put you right in the position you are right now watching this video. Think about that. So, I always thought that's interesting. Every decision you ever make, you wait a half an hour and think of all the decisions you've made since the half hour from prior, and you are where you are. That's, and we can adjust that depending upon if our behavior is negative or positive or righteous or wrong or evil or bad, good or, joyful. But I fly by the seat of my pants a lot. I'd like to listen. I am far from perfect. I've been a member of the LDS faith my whole life. I haven't been to church in over 10 years. My testimony's never been stronger. It's not because, and there's no relationship to not going to church with my testimony. I'm not professing that at all by any stretch of the imagination, and I'll tell you why. Back in 2012, I was in a car accident and broke my back. My wife broke her back also, and fortunate for us, our two youngest were saved miraculously with maybe a few minor lacerations from glass flying inside the car. But we had an impact of about 45, 48 miles an hour. We T-boned a 1995 Ford 250 dually. Hit it hard enough to push it up and over the curb. when it decided to go in front of us because he wanted a subway. Well, you know, I remember that day like it was yesterday. I mean, there's not a anything I don't remember about that day, but I was out of the car before the car came to a complete stop, and this kind of tells you a little bit about who I am. But I remember as the car's getting out, it was like a movie, literally like a John Wick movie. I literally, as it coasted, I just opened the door, I did my seatbelt, and hopped and just put myself out there, walked forward, grabbed the guy, came against the truck, and was just so angry because I knew without having any. I mean, I'm not a nurse or an EMD or paramedic or anything like that, but I knew the extent of injuries that we all had. You know, I mean, if it wasn't for my boys calling for me, I would have stayed there longer and probably would have done something I shouldn't have done. So luckily for my boys, they saved me. But going back, I was able to pass my sons off to some fortunate few that were there. Luckily, in the subway where this guy was going, there were some off-duty paramedics, and they came out and assisted. Um, and my wife had broken her leg, her back, severe whiplash, some other, ligaments and stuff that torn. I had severe burns in my arm from the airbag. They don't tell you that there's rocket propellant, by the way, in airbags. And I put oh boy, these are not doing good. Sorry for my glasses, just kind of being a little crazy. But yeah, rocket repellent. And I put my hand across the steering wheel like this, and I reached over like this to brace my wife in. We were both wearing seatbelts, fortunately. And anyway, I took some pretty severe burns in my left arm. Of course, the typical seatbelt bruises and, crushing, bruised sternum, ribs. I had a huge laceration on the top of my head as I hit the ceiling. And fortunately, I was strong enough that I was able to withstand, at least that's what I thought. Now just a brief little tangent here. For those of you who don't know, I spent my career in the personal training and fitness world. So at the time of the accident, I was, about 305 pounds, about 15% body fat. I could deadlift 385 to 405, 50 to 75 times in a row. And it's just to kind of get an idea of my level of fitness. I could run the stadium stairs. If those of you who are familiar, with Utah and the Ute Stadium, I could put a 60-pound weight vest on and I could run around the stairs, up and down the stadium, without problem. So I was a big guy. I was fit, which I think saved my life. But I, not knowingly, because I was so fit, I think this is the one time where it was a negative. I crushed my lower sacral vertebral bones, and I had a syndrome called Cauda equina syndrome. Hey! Which is if you look it up, it's an emergency surgery situation. It should be taken care of within 48 hours max. Well, I was misdiagnosed. I didn't have the correct diagnosis for a year and a half, and at that time the damage is already done. So but what happened is, so that was in June. It wasn't until November 29th. I was in my gym. I owned a little personal training studio, and I was cleaning my gym. I was putting a 45-pound plate away, and I heard a pop. I remember falling down to my knees, and as I'm falling to my knees, I exclaimed to God that it's over. I knew it was, right then and there. The pain was excruciating, but being who I am, I got up and I decided to exercise, warm up, stretch, which was stupid, but I was in such pain I needed to do something. I was supposed to pick up my son at the school, and I did, and that made it worse, sitting in the car, and got home. Anyway, to make a long story short, a year went by. I had back surgery in 2013. One of their titanium screws perforated my spinal sheath and lacerated and abrased my spinal cord. I had to have another surgery in 2015 where I almost died. Lost 60% of my blood. Was in a surgery for almost 12 hours and a lot of complications. I aspirated into my lungs, got a really bad case of pneumonia, had to stay in the hospital for a month to recuperate from that. And all while, unbeknownst to me, because this, we think you're invincible sometimes as man, which I think is a good thing sometimes, but that's a topic for a whole other discussion. But if you're interested in that topic, we can put that in the description. We can talk about that later because that's an important topic. But I didn't realize that I lost my identity that day. I spent 30-something years in the fitness industry. On my mission, I met the guy that did the Conan demonstrations at Universal Studios when I was in Palmdale, California. And he was a personal trainer, and I knew right then and there that's what I wanted to do. I soon got my mission. I went right into Beleif Fitness, remember Beleif Holiday Spa, and got certified. Got all the different certifications: CSCS, NACM, ACE. I don't know. I had 5 or 6 different certifications, and that was my life. I worked out 6 days a week for 30 years, maybe 35 years. You count going down my teens before that. I got up and I graduated from high school at 155. I came back from my mission at 175, and I had a goal by the time I was 40. I wanted to be 300 pounds. I almost had to double my body weight. I did it without drugs. I did it without steroids. I did it without performance enhancement of any kind. But it took till I was 40, 15, 18 years, basically, to achieve that. And I never wanted a six-pack. I was never interested in that crap. I wanted usable power. I wanted what would benefit my martial arts, what would benefit my life, what would make me bigger, faster, stronger, protect my family, destroy any perp that, crossed my path that needed to be destroyed. So that my family would be safe. That was my goal. I wanted to be the ultimate warrior in every way you could possibly think about it. I'm a big believer in not sparring. I think that's a waste of time. And we can go on a whole other video on that. Martial arts in general. There's, it's you learn real quick what works and doesn't work. And I hung my hat on the philosophy that Bruce Lee had, is that there's no sense of keeping a technique if it doesn't work. You just get rid of it. If you don't use it, you don't learn it. Don't put it in your repertoire. Don't practice it. If you spar, there's a difference between sparring and fighting, and there's a difference between fighting and real fighting. UFC and that kind of stuff, it's not fighting. Okay. Anyways, now I'm getting off topic. So I spent so 2015 is when I had my second surgery. They got me on narcotics, and I was, and I turned into a real asshole. And I was mean, I was sad, I was hurting inside, but I didn't tell anybody. I did some bad things, I almost, my existence almost came to an end a couple times. Fortunately enough, I had the wherewithal to stop. I went cold turkey off of the narcotics. And at one time I was taking 26 pills at a time, twice a day, morning and night. Now I'm down to 3, and 2 of them are for depression and anxiety, and 1 is for restless leg syndrome, which is the worst thing in the world. My gosh. anybody has any help for that, let me know, because that is miserable. So it's taken me, wow, 12, 15, almost, it'll take me 15 years to get to a place mentally and spiritually where I could do something like this. I went through hell, literally. Addiction is not a fun place to be at. Not for the challenge of getting off of it, but just for what it does to your spirit and your mental well-being. It's horrific. So in that process of all that, I started putting two and two together. How do I'm gonna get out of this eventually. And that's kind of what I told myself, but it was way back in the back of my mind. I had Mormon Fu. I had written a bunch of, 1 or 2 page Mormon Fu, manuscripts over the years that I was sometimes given a talk at church or at a fireside or whatever. But nothing on what I've done in the last 3 weeks. In the last 3 weeks, I've written 2.5 books, Mormon Fu. And it is myself in these books. It's fictional, but I take real life examples. First names are the real people that are in my life that have done things to help me, support me, help me grow, be a better person, better friend, better dad, better husband. And but like most men like structure. Okay, they like to have things written down. I got pads of paper everywhere on my desk, little notepads here just to write things down. If I'm playing a game, I write things down. If I want to find something, I write it down, and then I find a way to get it. I'm a problem solver, a risk assessor. That's what as a personal trainer, that's what you do. Someone comes to you with a problem, and you are trying to fix that for them. Over time, I learned that may be the end result, but the approach has to be different. And I perfected it. I've trained over 70,000 people in my career as a personal trainer, and but you go through all these fitness things. That's what it was. So we talked about the 7 principles that go into making you as an individual. So like if you put yourself here, there we go, and then you surround yourself with bubbles, and each bubble has a certain attribute. So strength, power, cardiovascular, nutrition, spirit, psychological, mental, and then you draw an arrow down to you because you're in the center, and those all help make you up. And some of them affect other ones more importantly. So nutrition, does it affect flexibility? No, but it does affect power and strength. It affects your mental, it affects your spirit. All those, and vice versa. The spirit affects your eating habits as well as your mental does too. So they all have different. So some of them affect a lot of other things, and some don't affect much, like flexibility. That's great for power, but maybe range of motion. You may think of that, but I'm not a big believer in the concept these people are teaching nowadays in fitness. It's a joke. It really is. It's really sad that we've gotten ourselves to the point where, we don't even tell the truth anymore. We're so concerned about the clicks, the likes, the subscribes, that it's kind of embarrassing, as I look back on it. But I wanted to figure out, what is the one thing as a person? What's the one thing that helps us the most in our life? What do we use to battle the forces of evil, you say? Mormon Fu, my foe, Lucifer, which is my hand-to-hand combat with Lucifer. What's all this is based around? How do I fight Lucifer and his temptations, the fiery darts of the adversary, in this many, many forms? You're dealing with a grand master of guerrilla warfare, and Lucifer. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He doesn't have a veil over his eyes. He remembers who we are. He remembers our potential. He remembers the things that God told us in heaven. He has all that as ammunition to use against us. And, we have just our faith. And one more thing. We have willpower. And willpower is something that we can manipulate through a certain kind of exercise. And I come up with a formula. It's taken a long time, but I have a formula that is based on real life, day-to-day attributes that we can define, put a number to, and we can increase our willpower. And what does willpower do? Well, willpower is your defense mechanism. You have a strong will. What does that mean? It means it takes more to break you. If you want to break somebody down, you got to break their will, the will to live, the will to be happy, the will to be good. The stronger your will is, the thicker that wall is, your defenses, and the harder it is to bring you down. And how do we do that? So if you look at willpower, we'll give it a W. Okay, well, it equals desire times belief, and put that in parentheses, plus temptation plus fatigue plus fear. Put that in parentheses. You can add those. You can add those together. Okay. Now the other fact of it, so that's just the basic formula. But if you want to get even further, there is a righteousness multiplier. Okay. And what that means is, as our actions become more consistent with our testimony and our belief system, our moral compass, okay? So as we become more righteous, and I'm sure we can define that differently for everybody, but it's pretty similar. As we endure to the end, righteousness, by the way, does not mean perfection by any stretch of the imagination. We are not here to be perfect. That isn't our goal. Our goal is the journey. Oftentimes they miss that in church, I think, of telling us it is impossible for us to be perfect. And even though they say, be therefore perfect as Christ, that's not what they're talking about, guys. If this is the line for perfection, this is where I start, this is where I end, okay? I may get this much in that goal. Christ does the rest of this. So from here to here, he makes up the difference. And that's how I'm perfect. Does that make sense? Okay? That's why we're all saved by grace. That's the grace message. Most religions blurt and forget out the other part of it, but there are a level of works that have to be done that correlate to those, for that benevolent action of grace. Just because you say I believe in Christ doesn't mean you're awarded eternal life. That is a big, big misconception. You may have immortality. That's different. We're all granted immortality. You will live forever. It depends on where you want to live. Okay? So how do we increase our willpower? What do we got to do? Well, come to find out, after asking a lot of people and talking about it, desire and belief, that's a given. We all desire to be good. We all desire to be better. We all desire to be better husbands, fathers, or daughters, wives, sisters, whatever it may be. Belief, well, we all have a belief, right? We all have a testimony. That's something we believe in. Well, that's not bad. Temptation, that's a given. That's more my food right there. We battle it every day in different forms. We have big temptations, little temptations, little temptations, big temptations, fatigue and fear. Okay? So those are all, hey, don't interrupt my video, mister. So you may call this righteous multipliers. It's like a Zen state. And so the righteous multiplier is based on your alignment with the divine covenants and righteous living. Okay, and so you can then categorize your righteous living, and you have a point system for each of these: baptism, gift of the Holy Ghost, the Aaronic priesthood, Melchizedek priesthood, temple endowment, temple marriage, weekly sacrament worship, tithing and fast offering, scripture study and prayer, acts of service and charity. And they all have different. There's an explanation for each of those, so you can make a judgment call of where you fall. And you make a judgment call from basically 0 to 0.0 to 1.0. You put that in your point system, it tallies it up, and if it totals 10, that's the max you can have, and that's what you multiply your final willpower at against everything else. Okay. I did make a mistake, and I apologize. It's not a minus between the two; it's a division. So you're taking your desire and belief, and you're dividing it by the computation of temptation, fatigue, and fear. Okay. What we find out is this. The harder the work is, the more awful the job description is, the more heinous it is, the more spiritually draining that it is, the fatigue factor, if there's fears involved, the greater those things are, the greater the willpower you'll get from it. If you can bear that, then you grow. So temptation, fear, and fatigue are all ways that we build our willpower, just like you would lifting weights to build a muscle. Okay. You add those. You take those. You take basically fatigue and fear. You add them together. You divide it into temptation, and divide that into your combination and multiplication of desire and belief. And I can put this up in the description. I just got to figure out how to do it. But that's just basically that's basically it. I mean, it's really let me see if there's anything else I needed to look at the final version. Let me see if I got it right here. So the R is what we call your righteous alignment score. And listen, this is Jeff Jensen talking, okay? This isn't something that's in some kind of psychological book. It's not in the Book of Mormon. You're not going to find Doctrine and Covenants. No bishop or stake president or prophet's going to, say this is, what the church believes in. It's not doctrinally, canon. But I will tell you, if you want your willpower to grow, the more the work that you do sucks. I'll give you an example. Growing up, my dad is a big believer on work, and I learned how to work at a young age and be very good at it. You show up 5 minutes early, you leave 5 minutes late from your job. You always give 100%, no matter what. So what he had us do is he had a rock pile out there. When we built our house. We lived in Big Flats, New York, and we were doing the backyard. We had a large yard, about an acre in the back, all grass, a couple little trees in the outskirts. That way we could play football. And there were a lot of rocks in the soil. So when we were getting ready to do, seed, we had a big rake. We'd rake all the rocks up, put them on the back of a lawnmower, basically a huge rake thing, and it would rake these rocks into a pile. And then we would take the rocks, put them in a wheelbarrow, we'll take them over to a pile of rocks. Well, my dad got the idea. We never caught on and didn't know until years later that basically we moved a rock pile around the whole yard multiple times, not knowing that it was the same rock pile we were moving. It just was a matter of work. Before that, especially when school was out in the summertime, we had to pick a bag of weeds, a big grocery bag, or a big paper grocery bag full of weeds. And then we would have to go. We couldn't fluff it up. We tried that, we tried to fluff it up with grass at the bottom or whatever. My dad would dump it out, and he'd call, and of course then he'd get in more trouble, But My dad's favorite form of punishment was grounding without food. So we'd be grounded to our room. We wouldn't, no dinner. Um, it may be harsh, but I think kids nowadays could use some punishment like that. It definitely teaches you humility, and it teaches the value of doing what you say you're going to do. If your dad tells you, Jeff, I want you to do this, you say yes, you're agreeing. I made a verbal contract with them to say, I'm going to do what you asked me to do. I'm going to do what and when I break that, I broke a vow, and there's a consequence for that. Okay? The consequence was is I would go without food and be grounded for the night or the weekend. So, so the harder the work. So an idea would be, let's say it's a cool morning, a cool Saturday morning. I go pick weeds. It's a job, and so yeah, it's a little uncomfortable. Not much, but it's cool. Maybe there's a slight mist, from fog. So it's somewhat actually refreshing. Versus maybe I decide to do the weeds later on in the day, and I go out. It's a 95-degree day. It's blue sky, 95% humidity, which is common in upstate New York. And now the work has now shot up in intensity. So because work went up in intensity, my willpower, the if I continue to work at that level, day in, day out, not just one time, but day in, day out, my willpower increases. So as the more life sucks, okay, the more that you have to deal with challenges, more risks you take. Risks meaning that if someone offers you a job but you don't take it because it's hard, well, you're not going to grow. You know, look at every professional athlete in the world. How do you get better when you're a professional athlete? If I'm the fastest man in the world, how do I get faster? Well, you want to run against somebody who's faster than you. Well, you can't. So you have to do certain things. You run downhill, so you can run faster than you can. You run maybe being pulled by a car, to maybe a couple mile an hour faster than what your top speed is, or a treadmill with a harness, so you can, you're trying to train your body that it can handle faster speeds, but it's very uncomfortable. Well, one thing I learned early on in my career with the human body is the body only likes to do two things. It either will get injured or it gets stronger. It's that simple. There isn't an in between anywhere. The body will never ever stay the same. It's never here. You're either going to progress or you're going to digress. Okay? Um, so when you go into the gym and you do the same bicep curl for the that you have been doing for the last 3 years, you wonder why nothing's happening. Well, it's because you're putting zero effort into it. There's no will that's happening here. Your body's not having something that is challenging. If you're not making faces in the mirror because your muscle burns so bad, you're not working hard enough, because that's what makes change happen. And that's just in a exercise room. Out in the real world, though, if you got a tough boss, but let's say he's fair, you're going to be a better employee. Okay, because you're going to learn to work hard, and pretty soon you also learn to work smarter, not harder. Okay, smarts is a portion of the formula that you can put in there that can take the place of challenge. So, ooh, excuse me. So if an effort takes a lot of computation, maybe it's an easy thing, but it takes an incredible amount of mental fortitude or spiritual fortitude for that matter. Maybe you're fasting. That's a great way to develop willpower. I mean, long-term fasting. Five plus days, a week to 10 days, or 12 days fast. And that's how I initially myself lost my initial 100 pounds, was by fasting for 7 and 10 days stints. So we have complete control over willpower. We have complete control over how we accomplish growing our willpower, And it's a simple formula. You cannot shy away from hard things. You will never grow. You will not have an opportunity to grow and be better if you constantly have other people do it for you, or if you manipulate others to do it for you, or you simply are too lazy to do it, or you just don't want to do it. And then you wonder why you keep succumbing to sin or temptation, or not getting the things that you desire in life. It's because you have low willpower. It's kind of like the difference between motivation and discipline. Okay? What happens when motivation runs out? What do we fall back on? Discipline. Think about it. As a trainer, that's what we did for an hour. It's easy to motivate someone for an hour because we're there. They're paying us to motivate them, and it's easy to say, "Hey, let's do a set of 15. At 15, let's do 5 more. Let's do 5 more. Let's do 5 more." And they realize they can push themselves because as a trainer, we're able to see outside of your potential. We are always our own worst critic as humans, but someone from the outside looking in sees sees closer to what our real potential really is. So I know if I say 15, I'm really meaning 25. But I need you to come to that conclusion, not me. You need to see that you can work hard and benefit from it. And then that's how you increase your willpower. Anyway, guys, that's I think that's long enough. That's almost 36 minutes. Wow, time must fly. Listen, I love this stuff. There are so many things out there that I have put together and have written down. That can benefit all of us. It benefits me every day. I'm not perfect. I like to swear. I swear sometimes when I play games. Sometimes I swear at my family. I don't like it. I'm a hothead. My emotions are on my sleeve, and when I get angry, I swear. Is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. I guess if you look at the nuts and bolts of it, yeah, it's not good. Let's put it that way. It's not a righteous thing. So that's not going to help me in my willpower, is it? When I can control my swearing, when I can get angry and control that anger, and I can dismiss my anger, I can pacify it, then my willpower goes up. Because now I have controlled anger, which is very powerful. Anyway, guys, head up, look at some other videos if you need to. Leave some comments down there. I look forward to reading your comments. So far, I've only had a couple comments. It's fine. I'm just starting out. And so I'm not here to, if you want to subscribe, go for it. If you don't, that's fine too. I'm here because I have a message, and I'm going to deliver it whether I have followers or not. It's that simple. So, guys, thanks again for showing up. And look for the new video in a couple days. And peace. See you guys later.